Hey, this is Coach D again with the TI-Nspire Touchpad tutorial, and on to category 2 of the Algebra EOC test, and I'm using release tests from the 2012-13 test. So let's get started. The reporting category 2 has to do with properties and attributes of functions, which is historically a low scoring category. So we want to make sure that we know as much as we can to utilize the calculator. You still have to know the knowledge and set up problems, but once you do that, the calculator can do the rest for you. So in this first problem, the set of ordered pairs below represents some points on the graph of function f, and you are given a relation with 5 points. What is the parent function of f? Parent function. We should know by now, we're used to parent functions being y equals x squared, y equals x cubed, y equals x to some power. But you don't see a coefficient, pretty much don't really see numbers. Now, when we deal with exponential equations, that's a little different. We'll have a different base and x will be to the exponent, but again, we don't see numbers. So that should stand, numbers that aren't in the exponent. So that should make g stand out. But y equals x, that is the parent function for all linear equations. Graphs that look like a line. Y equals x squared, that is the parent function for all quadratic equations, which look like a parabola opening up or down. When you get to algebra 2, they'll open left and right also. I'm not going to discuss J. That's nothing like what we've seen this year. You don't even need to worry about it. G, we just said 2 should not be as that base. We should have a letter, A or a B, for the parameter. So exponential growth would look something similar to that, and exponential decay would look something similar to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to open a list and spreadsheet, list up these points, then we're going to open up a data and statistics page and plot them in a scatter plot. So first thing I'll do is I'll go to home, start a new document, which is 1, and not save anything. So I want to get rid of all the junk, and I need a list and spreadsheets page, which is 4. List these points. To make it easy for me to see, I'm just going to highlight the X or independent values just so I can see them better, and go ahead and type those in. 3, -1, 5, -4, and -7. Then go to the top and put the corresponding y values. 11, 3, 15, -3, -9. Now, for this to work on the data sheet, I have to label these columns so that the calculator knows whatever word I put, it means to pull these values. So this is my input, and that's what I'm going to call it, INPUT. It's in italics, but when I hit enter, it goes to normal text. And that's how you know that you have actually hit enter. The y values in column B are going to be my output. Again, until you hit enter, it's going to stay in italics. So now I need that data and statistics sheet. So I'm going to insert, Control I, data and statistics, which is 5. And you and your neighbor could have done everything exactly the same, but this page looks different for you. That doesn't mean anything. That's just the calculator just throws those numbers out there. What you do next is when your pages should look exactly the same. So hit tab. It's going to go to your x-axis, and we said that was our input, which is highlighted, so we will click on input, and it aligns to the values under that column A where input was labeled. Hit tab again, it goes to the y-axis. We're going to arrow down and pick output, select that, and you can clearly see this makes a straight line. So this is a linear equation. Easy enough. On to the next. Okay, the first 6 numbers in a pattern are shown below. If the pattern continues, which expression can be used to find the nth term? of that pattern. So you have a pattern and you want to know the expression to find the nth term. Okay, the nth term just means which position. If I say what was the 7th term, what was the 8th, the 40th, 100th, that's what that n represents. So when you are given a pattern, you are given your y or dependent values. The x values, all you have to do is count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the position. The only time that you don't start with a 1 is if the problem tells you to start a different number, or if you're dealing with exponential growth. A lot of those start with a 0, but there'll be something in the problem that tells you that. It'll usually be labeled for testing purposes. So I need another list and spreadsheet. I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to hit Control I, list and spreadsheet, which is 4, and I'm going to enter the x values, the positions. Now technically, if you have a linear equation, you only need 2 points. Quadratic, you need up to 3, at least 3, I'm sorry, not up to. And for an exponential, you need at least 4. I'm going to go ahead and put all 6 in just so that you can see the graph better, because the fewer points, the less accurate it tends to look. So here, I'm going to put the fractions in exactly as I see them. The calculator is not going to do anything to those fractions unless you add in a decimal. Off the top of my head, I don't remember if it'll reduce them on this screen for you, but it doesn't matter. Okay, again, we need to label these columns. Cannot use the same words we used before. Input and output are assigned in the calculator. So we'll just call this one in, and then call the other one out. Again, to get that data sheet, we'll insert a page, Control I, and we want a data and statistics page, which is 5. Again, I have to hit Tab, assign that x-axis as in, then Tab again, assign that y-axis as out. And we can see this is clearly not a straight line, so it cannot be a linear equation. It's got a little curve going. So, into the first power, that's linear. Into the second power, that's quadratic. Into the second power again, quadratic. And into the first power is linear. So we know answer choices A and D are not correct. So which one is it going to be? Are we going to have n squared divided by 3 or 6? Well, we can have the calculator give us that equation. We'll go to menu. We're going to analyze this graph, which is 4. And then we want the regression, which is 6. We just said it was quadratic. The choice for quadratic is 4. And here, I'm going to grab it so you can see it better, is our equation. Now, this little funny looking part over here with the e and the negative, that's your scientific notation over there, that exponential, e to the power of negative 13. That's like saying I have a negative 1, and then you move that decimal point to the left 13 times, which is basically saying 0. The algorithm of the calculator has made it to where it didn't get 0. It's rounding because of this program, but it's basically meaning a 0. Whenever you see e to the negative and some big number, it means 0. So both of these are saying there's nothing there. It's really saying 0.3 repeating x squared. And by now, I would hope that we know what 0.3 repeating is. It's equal to 1/3. This is n squared times 1/3, or n squared over 3. This is n squared times 1/6, or n squared over 6. So our answer is B. And you can go to the calculator page. If you were unsure, you could say, let me insert, because I don't remember about that decimal. Calculator, and I'll say 1 divided by 3. It's a fraction. Oh, let me turn it to a decimal. Control, enter. Yep, it's that n squared over 3. Okay? Moving on. Alright, the perimeter of a rectangle is 42 centimeters. So perimeter, I'm going to start underlining my information in different colors. Perimeter of a rectangle, 42 centimeters. The length of the rectangle can be represented by x plus 4. So the length is x plus 4. The width can be represented by 2x minus 7. Width, 2x minus 7. I'm specifically underlining just exactly what I need to pull out. The more I use and the less I make it stand out, the less likely me pulling this information out or underlining it is even helping me, okay? What are the dimensions of the rectangle? So I want to know, what are the dimensions of this rectangle? So I need to know the length and the width. Alright, so let's write down what we're given. Perimeter is 42 centimeters. Length is x plus 4. Width is 2x minus 7. We're talking about perimeter. I need that formula for perimeter. Two formulas I can use. P equals 2L plus 2W. The other one you can use, which I'm not going to use, is P equals 2 parentheses length plus width. Okay, use whichever one you prefer. So, substitute in. And I'm actually, let me erase that, make it neater. I'm actually going to make a little change here. I'm not going to put the P there because we actually know what P is. So when you sub in everything you know. So 42 there. So now I could use my distributive property if I wanted, and by hand I could multiply that exponent, that coefficient outside the parentheses times each term of this binomial. I could do the same there, but again, this is about the calculator. Let's let that calculator work for us. I need a calculator page, which I already have up. I'm going to utilize NSolve. So I want menu, algebra, which is 3, and numerical solve, which is 1. Now, if you don't remember the keystrokes, you can actually type NSolve, open parentheses, and it'll work just the same. You're going to type exactly what you see, every symbol. Don't simplify, don't combine anything, don't distribute, just type exactly what you see. So 42 equals 2 parentheses x plus 4 close parentheses plus 2 open parentheses 2x minus 7 close parentheses. Now there's a big set of parentheses around everything. The last thing you need to do is ask yourself, what am I solving for? And we're solving for x, so I put comma x. Hit enter, and you're done. X equals 8. Okay? I'm going to circle this because it's not the answer. For math, our final answer is boxed in. So even though I see an 8, and some people are going to go, oh, there's an 8, that's the answer. That's not what it asked us. We were asked to find the length and the width. We found x. So now we have to sub in. So to find the length, I'm going to replace that x with an 8. So I'm going to say that is 8 plus 4, which is 12. Now right there, we found the answer, but let's double check. Since none of them duplicate, I want to make sure that this width is actually 9. So for the width, 2 times 8 minus 7. If you can't do it in your head, put it in the calculator. But that's 16 minus 7, which is 9. Yep, that is our answer. J is our answer. Okay, moving on. Alright, now we have inequalities. Which inequality is equivalent to 7x minus 2y is greater than 8? Now I'm looking at my answer choices and I notice 2 of them when they are in what's equivalent to slope-intercept form of a regular equation, they have the same slopes, and the other two equations have the same slopes. But what I notice is different is all four of these have different y-intercept values. So I know if I can get this equation into what's equivalent to slope-intercept form of a linear equation, all I got to do is look at the y-intercept. So I want y, the inequality, mx plus b. The y is there, but it's not by itself. It's got a negative 2 in front of it. The b is on the correct side, but this x term needs to go to the other side of the equation. So when I bring this down, I'll say negative 2y is greater than. I'm going to slide this 8, this positive 8, underneath the b because that's what it matches with. And to get this 7x over to the right side, I have to subtract it from each side. So it's going to become a negative 7x. Okay? Now, looking at this right now, I know my last step is always divide by the coefficient of y. The fact that I have an 8 there and I haven't divided yet, that's not going to be my answer. But what's special here is I have a negative coefficient. And when you have inequalities, not only do all of the signs of the terms change by dividing by negative, but the inequality symbol changes. So what we like to say is flip everything. So if I'm going to divide everything by negative 2, I'm going to get a, let's see, let's put on everything, divide by negative 2. All that divide by negative 2, flip terms and inequality. Okay? So without thinking, if I divide by negative 2, the whole point was to get rid of the negative 2. I'm left with just a y. Flip your inequality. Negative 7 divided by negative 2 will simplify in a second. X. And then 8 divided by negative 2. That in itself lets me eliminate answer choices based on my inequality. So which ones don't open to the right? This one does not open to the right, so that's why it's wrong. So now we're narrowed down to 2 problems. But we can clearly see this is not going to reduce to negative 4 over 7. And we see the mistake they did here. They were dividing by the coefficient of x and got mixed up. But y is less than, negative over negative is positive, 7 over 2x. Positive over negative is negative 4. And there's your answer. Now, how could we have done this in the calculator? Very easy. We are going to utilize the solve feature for systems of equations even though we don't have a system. So I'm going to go to menu, algebra, which is 3. I'm going to go to solve system of linear equations 2. Well, I don't have 2 equations, I have 1. So change that to a 1. And when you tab down, change this to a y comma x. Think of it as I need to solve for y in terms of x. Tab till you get to OK. Now you type that initial equation exactly how you saw it without the inequality. I'm going to make that inequality where I put the box up here, I'm going to make it an equal sign. Because the whole point is we're just trying to get these values in order. So I'm going to put 7x minus 2y equals 8. And it already has the comma which you want it to give you as your answer. So this tells me C1, and it might have C2, C50, C whatever. That's your variable. That's x. So this says 7 over 2x minus 4, which is what we have. And sometimes this is backwards. It might have had negative 4 plus 7 over 2 C1. Either way, we just got this equation. All right, moving on to the next. Which expression is equivalent to negative 6x squared minus 11x minus 4. Well, you have a quadratic that's in standard form, and you have factored forms of what looks like quadratics because I have an x term in each of these binomials. First thing I want to do to narrow down my answers to not waste time on the calculator is I notice the coefficient of the quadratic is a negative. The only way that can be negative is if I multiply a positive x term and a negative x term. So I see I have positive and positive. That should give me positive when I multiply. Negative and positive. That gives me negative. Positive and positive. Negative and positive. We want to get a negative. The ones that give me positives are incorrect. Okay? So now all I have to do is graph the given equation and then graph these factor forms and compare them. So I'm going to insert a new page, Control I, a graph which is 2, and type this original inequality. Negative 6x squared minus 11x minus 4. And it is a parabola that opens down. We already said that because of the negative, that it something was special about it. Well, that's what it is. It's that it's going to open down. So let's now graph this next equation on the same page. So I'm going to hit Tab so that the entry line pops up. Don't try to simplify this. Type it exactly how you see it. Parentheses negative 3x plus 4. Close parentheses, open parentheses, 2x minus 1. Close your parentheses. And you can see they're next to each other. Let's move that out the way. They're next to each other, so they're not the same equation. If I go ahead and tab, this would allow me to enter a third equation, but I'm just going to type over the one that I said I know was not correct. Up arrow, and I'm back there. Let's see what is different. This had negative, negative, positive, negative. So let's change this to a negative. That's positive, positive, negative, positive, and change that to a plus sign. Yes, a plus sign. And that's how we will fix this. So that, delete it, plus sign. Delete that and put a minus sign. And you don't see anything because it's right on top of it. It's the exact same equation. If you wanted to verify, well, how do I know it's just not somewhere else on the screen? You look at a table. Control T and arrow to the right, and you see you have the exact same values. That was another way that you could have just compared the tables. And if you have all the same x values for f of 1 and f of 2, you got the same equation. So your answer is D. Okay, here we are going to have to verify which step is incorrect. We're given a long expression. It's not an equation, it's an expression. There's no equal sign. And we're going to simplify each step. So which step below does the mistake first appear? That's the key thing, is first. Because if there's a mistake in every step, step 1 would be the answer. Okay, so we can simplify this in the calculator also. I'm going to insert a calculator page, Control I, and 1 is a calculator page. And as I look at this, I notice I have 3 sets of parentheses, and I'm down to 2, I'm down to 1, I'm down to none. They're simplifying each of these little pieces of the problem one piece at a time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize the true-false feature, which used to be Boolean logic on the 84 calculator. It's going to tell me yes or no after I ask it a question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type this piece of the formula, piece of the expression, and see if it matches with this piece of the expression, because everything else is still the same. But before I do any of that, I need to assign C a value. So first I'm going to do this without assigning C a value, just to show you what happens. So let's type 0.5 parentheses negative 12C plus 6 close parentheses, And if we think these are equivalent, they should be equal. So let's set them equal. That's equal to negative 6c plus 3. Now, I told you we were doing this on purpose to show you what was going to happen. It says no value is assigned to the variable. And it's telling you use the store feature. So when you get an error, read the error so that you know if the calculator is actually doing what it's supposed to. The calculator is going to do what you typed in there. So it's doing what it's supposed to, but did you do what you're supposed to? So we have to go back and give a value to C, because the calculator thinks it's multiplying right here, but it doesn't have a number. If there's a number, it can multiply negative 12 times the number. So let's hit OK. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a weird number. I'm not going to pick 0, 1, 2. I'm going to pick negative 3.7. And I'm going to assign that, so control the var button, because that's what store is, as C. So now every time on this calculator page that I type a C, it thinks I'm typing a negative 3.7. So now instead of retyping all of this, I'll just up arrow, highlight the problem, and hit enter. Now that I've already assigned negative 3.7 for the value of C, I hit enter, and it plugged it in, and yes, this works. So that means there was nothing wrong with step 1. So then I can go to step 2 and I can do the same thing. See, negative 3 parentheses, C plus 4, close parentheses, and this is supposed to equal this piece. Again, we checked in advance to see what changed each time. Make sure you don't forget all the signs. And this should be negative 3c minus 12. Now make sure you don't put a negative sign there, because if you didn't put a minus and you put a negative, it's going to think you want to multiply times negative 12. Again, nothing wrong here, so we'll try the last piece. 10 parentheses c minus 5, close parentheses, equals 10c minus 50. Now I know this is time consuming, but again, you don't always have to use the calculator. It's a matter of sometimes checking your work. True, that one works also. So hopefully this last step doesn't work, because if it does, then we did something wrong up here. So this looks a lot longer than this, and we just proved that so far they're equivalent. So I'm going to type this piece in. But usually I recommend you go to the top. But since we verified all that, we'll just type the bottom. So negative 6c plus 3 minus 3c minus 12 plus 10c minus 50. Now I'm going to double check and look to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. All that is supposed to equal 7c minus 41. And sure enough, it says false. Again, the smartest thing would be, if you've checked all of these, utilize the easier equation, but sometimes it's safer to go from the beginning because you may have made a mistake in between. So D is our answer choice there. And this is the last question for this segment. Let's go through this quick as possible. The number of ferry boats, F of C, so number of ferry boats, F of C, needed to transport C cars in one day. So your C is the number of cars transported in a day. Can be found using this function. F of C equals C divided by 20. There are no more than 5,000 cars transported by the ferry daily. What is the range of the function of this situation? So our question is, what is the range keyword of this function? Range has to do with dependent, your y values, which would be f of whatever, that's your y value. So that range has to do with f of c. So if I write that equation off to the side, well, I don't have to write it to the side. If I type it in the calculator and see what it looks like, that's one way to help. But let's break it down. Let's actually plug in some values if we have any. F of c equals C, the number of cars transported in a day. Well, we know it's no more than 5,000. Can we transport 5,000? If we say no more than 5,000, can we actually have 5,000? Yes, because if I say you can't have more than $10 and I give you $10, that's not more, you can have that. So we'll plug that value in to the equation. And that's going to simplify to, and it's actually f of 5,000. Technically, I should have wrote that. It gives us 250. So if we can have no more than 5,000 cars, then f of c can be no more than 250. And f of c is the number of ferry trips. So 5,000 has nothing to do with the range. It has to do with how we can calculate it, but it's not a part of it. So our question is, are the set of these numbers going to be greater than or equal to 250? Or are they going to be from 0 to 250? If I'm unsure, the only way that I'm going to really utilize the calculator on here is just to get a quick visual. So I'm going to insert a graph, Control I, graphs are 2, and I am going to graph this equation, or this function. And it is, instead of a c, I'm going to type x divided by 20. Now, this doesn't show me a lot because we're working with some big numbers here. So if I go to my window, so menu, for my window, and I am going to pick the settings, okay? C is my cars, that's that 5,000, okay? So C is where X usually is. I'm going to go all the way up to 5,000 here. So just to see my axis, I'll chop off the last number and say I can go to a negative 500. Oops, let me go back to my window. Sorry about that. Okay, negative 500 tab, and then go up to that 5,000. And instead of auto, I want to pick how I want to count here. So I'm going to say I'm going to count by thousands, because I don't want to see a whole bunch of little tick marks. You'll end up looking like a line. Now for the Y values, we just said 250, so that minimum will drop the 0 and we'll go to negative 25. And we'll go up to 250. Tab, and we're going to count by, let's tick marks by 50s. And then hit OK. Now just so you can see, when you think domain and range, sometimes people have to see it. And if you remember, domain is here and X is here. It's one thing to say it, but to see it on the graph and you'll go, okay, it's the up and down, and I'm stopping at 250. Okay, so you really don't need the calculator for the sake of graphing it, but sometimes it helps with the visual. But this part right here, if you can't simplify this, you'll go ahead and put that in the calculator. So we can have 0. This says greater than. This means we're getting values above it, but now we're in this area. So our answer is going to be the integers from 0 to 250. Okay, so that's all the questions from category 2 that are released from the 2012-13 tax. EOC. And the next session is going to be over category 3, and it's going to be broken into 2 because there are a lot of problems. All right, thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful.